he was in his mom's room and he was being sneaky and he was laughing and he was running by and he had these artifacts in his hand that I would compare to Stonehenge little objects. They were little rock gods. Sky gets a green haze. Everything changes. Unless you're a zombie, you're aware. And I was aware something was happening. And I said, come on out of there. And I didn't like to say his name. I call him little buddy or, hey, honey, come on out of there. And something was happening. And my aunt had told me, don't let nothing happen to that little kid. And the way that she said it, and I never, I protect kids from dogs and anything. I mean, I'm into horses and monkeys. I'm not afraid of most things. And the way that she said, I said, why? And she said, he's going to rule the world someday. So why does all this matter? Because when Fritz Springmeier or any of the CIA documents talk about the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, which I know the world is very interested in, and I'm just here to tell you that there's a missing piece. There's the true bloodline to rule the world was the Aragon blood that they stole the baby. And they've been rebreeding the Antichrist, Rosemary's baby.
So you've been seen on the internet by probably millions of people by now talking about your time with the Elon Musk family. And so I just want to let you start it off from your earliest memory with that family and why you're even there. And then we'll just let you go. And if I haven't, I'll have questions that I'm sure I'll interject into that. And I'm sure the audience will have plenty of questions as well.
This story doesn't make any sense if you're not looking for the truth. The Bible says to them that love the truth, right? Because otherwise we have to be careful of being mockers and scoffers because it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to crack a door and let you into a strange world that I grew up in, a subculture, a Nazi, Pharaoh, Egyptian subculture that's right here in America, hiding in plain sight. I just want to tell you from where I woke up. About 2017 in winter when prices are cheaper to fly, my son-in-law came and put a big TV on my wall. And I hadn't looked at TV. I'd been going in the wilderness for a long time. And he showed me what my grandkids could watch. And I said, well, what could I watch? Is there anything cool I could watch? And he says, Richie from Boston. And he puts on Richie from Boston with Geordie Rose. And I have a cousin in Silicon Valley, and I have a cousin named Geordie in Silicon Valley. So I looked up at the screen and paid particular attention. And all of a sudden, Elon Musk was there. And I said, Elon. And my kids said, no, Mom, it's Elon. And I said, it's Elon. And I said, I know them. And I took down a picture of my grandfather, who my oldest daughter knew. And I said, your grandpa, your great grandpa, kicked his grandpa's butt. They called him a no good, dirty technocrat. And I said, what's that, Grandpa? And he said, a Nazi. They're Nazis, Mary. Okay, that's when I guess I started waking up. It's not when the memories came back, because millions of people have asked me, when did your memories come back? It's not when my memories came back. It's when I first, the Bible says in Matthew 25, the wise and foolish virgins, and everybody woke up. The 5 were wise, 5 were foolish. We're only talking about the brethren here. Some were foolish and didn't take oil. Well, we all woke up. We all had an epiphany around 2017, 2018. And I realized Elon Musk had taken the stage. And his name wasn't always Elon. It was Elyon, and then it was Elyon, and then it was Elon. So I started down this journey kind of like the Truman Show live, laughing and crying and living it out, evacuating from fires that were coming out of nowhere, 139,000 acres right 3 miles from my house, consistently burning me out like a horseshoe. And my throat has been affected. It's been difficult to breathe and tell my story. But that's when I first woke up. Was my son-in-law said it was 2017 when he came. And I said, his grandpa, Dr. Joshua Norman Haldeman, was arrested for being a technocrat leader, which I guess everybody knew what that meant back then. It was Hitler. We're talking about Nazis. And that they were plotting to take over the world by force with robots. Now, my grandfather beat up Haldeman, Elon's grandpa, about 1978. I've sent you some postcards. Did you get the one to the hooker's ball?
I did. I saw that.
Okay, that you know, if it was the same year or the year before or after. um, so my grandpa beat up his grandpa and said, "What, Canada didn't want you? We don't either, you no good dirty call me bastard." He said, "What, faked your own death? Like Hitler." And those are the words my grandpa said. And I'm not going to go into all the emotions and what else was happening that day. But that was about 1978, 1979. That was after the Hooker's Ball. May have been that Hooker's Ball or a different one. But I think that's the only one at the Civic Auditorium in San Francisco. And I was there, and Jerry Brown was there with Linda Ronstadt. And, you know, the elites are rocking the world, right? Hiding in plain sight. So now what? So on my journey, I discovered on my birth certificate, one day, Joe Rogan was talking about CIA safe houses and all this MK Ultra stuff in San Francisco. And the address he was talking about is on my birth certificate where my mother supposedly lived. So that started me down another rabbit hole. But I started telling you my story in 2018, 19, whenever Gonzo said I wrote that letter. That was the first time it really hit the shot heard round the world that Elon Musk, they're Illuminati. So they are plotting to take over the world by force with robots. I shared that, which sounded crazy because he didn't have anything to do with robots. And also when I was a girl, I asked my, not blood auntie, but one of my Illuminati aunties, you know, like the witches, there's always 3 witches. I asked her, is Elon or Ellie, I called him Ellie. I said, is he the Antichrist? And she said, no, but he will present the mark. And when you see him do that, the Antichrist will take the stage. Well, these aren't things I could carry. You know, if I talked about this in my childhood, my growing up, this is crazy talk. But meanwhile, we're delivering van loads of TVs and cartons of cigarettes to Charlie Manson and the gang. If you can imagine Elon Musk's mother, this beautiful, famous, elite, nutritionalist, packing van loads of TVs and cartons of cigarettes to San Quentin and the Charlie girls too. And meanwhile, I noticed that presidents' assassinations are happening in the middle of this. President Ford, President Reagan. Oh, this is on the Richter scale. And I asked my aunt, why are we doing this? And she said, I said, why is Light taking TVs to Charlie? I said, as a teenager, to my aunt, who was the head of the Santeria. And that's another rabbit hole. She said, she's buying May Musk. She's buying future chaos. That's a CIA operation. And some of the things I discussed, although stuttering my brains out and making no sense because it doesn't make any sense. Meanwhile, Tom O'Neill is writing a book called Operation Chaos. And some of the things I talk about came out in that book in declassified documents. That Charlie Manson was in fact CIA with handlers, and he's actually the priest of their church, which is a whole weird process church thing.
Can we pause for just a second? I do have a question. So you talked about CIA camps, like these camps where people grow up in, live in.
I'm sorry.
Tell me a little bit more about. Well, I don't know if that's what you said. I thought you said CIA camps, but maybe Sky camps. What are these places that these people grow up in, and why were they associated with Charlie Manson? And I know that there's a lot of connection with the CIA and Charlie and all of the Nazi International and all of that, but why were you involved? I guess just to make that clear, like why are you and your family involved?
I've tried to figure that out myself. I told Donna Carrico, I said, I know who in my life I can verify eyewitness. I know what we were doing. So I know who I was dealing with. May Musk, her father, Dr. Joshua Norman Holloman, who faked his death and was running around doing evil secret stuff. Elon, who appears out of nowhere, grows at an odd rate, and is always talking about ruling with the world and Mars and all that, and Apollo. Why? I don't know. But I can tell you some things about Charlie. My friends say, don't talk about Charlie Manson with this. It will make no sense. It will make you sound crazy. But you're asking me about Charlie Manson? I tell you some common denominators in my own life that are very upsetting, very disturbing, John. Is that, okay, Roger Smith, are you familiar with his name?
I'm not. No.
Charlie Manson's parole officer on the record is actually a CIA agent, okay? And he's just doubling down. And he's always at they call them the San Francisco medical clinics. And they're touted as one thing publicly, but what they're doing is a whole other thing, okay? Because it's a CIA operation. It's all this, I hate the word MK Ultra, whatever that is, because I'm too close to see the forest through the trees on that. I don't speak the language. I just lived it. We didn't call it that on the live stage. We didn't call it MK Ultra, but there were whispers. And those had lots of cuss words in them, so I have a hard time translating it back to English for a Christian. But I do try to give you the language, and you figure it out for yourself. Charlie Manson. Why? I don't know. Me? I'm the only kid. Well, there was a boy named Joaquin who I don't want to go down the El Chapo rabbit hole. There's a boy named Joaquin. He was a mule for the prisons. He was a lot older than he looked, and I always thought he was, and everybody called him El Chapo, and I said, I'm not going to call, what's his real name? Joaquin. So I always called him Joaquin. And his mother, but it could have been one of his Illuminati aunties, but I thought it was his mother. But he was a mule, a drug mule for many of the prisons, and everything that we were doing. He was one of my handlers. You know, if he came and told me what to do, I did it. And I asked him for something, he brought it to me. But I had to stay where I was like a genie in a bottle. This Charlie Manson thing, I don't know. But he's the pastor of the Process Church. And he's a moonchild, and I'm a moonchild. And that's a whole Jack Parsons explanation. And I don't watch Netflix. But I started to tell the world that I'm a moonchild. My father is the seventh son of a seventh son from Spain. Last name Aragon. That's the bloodline to rule the world. Elon is that bloodline. I am that bloodline. I know I was born of my mother, but I asked if he was one of his grandfather's experiments in the lab. But let's go back to Charlie Manson. You asked me about Charlie. Charlie Manson's parole officer is on my birth certificate. Does that make any sense? All my life I asked, but I didn't realize that's who he was until just recently, and it scared the crap out of me. And the Lord has been so gentle and kind. As I see all this sickening stuff in plain sight, the world thinks they're waking up. They think they're seeing some things. Dear God, you wouldn't believe what I find every day, John, in a box of documents. And so Roger Smith is Charlie Manson's parole officer. Well, all my life, I said, well, Mom, who's this Roger guy on my birth certificate? She said, Mary, they drugged me. You know, Light was there. Light was there in the hospital. And Gary was called Kaiser in San Francisco in 1965. All the, you know, May Musk was there. And she said, name her Rosemary, because they were doing their Rosemary's Baby spell. And they were breeding the Antichrist. And why? I don't know. Why is Charlie Manson in on it? I don't know. But Roger Smith tried to adopt me, and my mom said, the hell with that. And there was a moment of coming down off whatever they drugged the toilet paper with, and she ran again. My mother ran from the castle. My mother ran from Roger Smith's beautiful apartment on Frederick Street. My mother ran from the clinic, the San Francisco drug clinic that they say, but it was really a CIA operation to handle everybody, and they were drugging everybody. I don't know. Let's see. Charlie Manson's a weird subject. Why? I don't know. When I was delivering cartons of cigarettes and TVs to Charlie Manson, I didn't know anything about his parole officer being on my birth certificate. That didn't add up yet. I'm 60 years old now, and I just found that out. And God has been so good. Why? I don't know, John. But it's pieces to the puzzle. I'm
It's
sorry. Did I
completely
say too
as
much?
no, you didn't. I think that's crazy because when you're just now finding that stuff out, it just kind of adds more to your story, really, and credibility as well. And I know a lot of people are really interested in asking you questions and talking to you. And I know you're coming to SpiracyCon, so you'll be able to answer people probably a little bit more in person, which I'm really thankful that you're coming as well, because I know there's so many people that really can probably relate with some of the stuff you
Well,
went
I
through.
get in fight or flight when people ask me really personal questions. This is horrible. This is like somebody being raped and
Yeah.
brutalized by a gang, and then everybody goes, "Hey, tell us the gory details." It's really hard, John.
Yeah.
This is so hard, and now I have so much mercy for my mother, because I got to tell you, John, I hated my mother most of my life. I wanted peace with her, but it didn't make any sense. And now I love her, and I think, what chance did a 3-year-old little girl have against 1,600 crazy Nazi scientists and a
Mm.
whole government with endless money to carry out some plot, right? I don't know what it is. But why am I involved? Because I'm a moon child of the Aragons. The Aragons, can I answer that question? Why am
Yeah,
I
please,
involved?
please do.
Again,
Please
I
do.
don't know, but I'll tell you some of the common denominators. Charlie Manson's parole officer tried to adopt me and Charlie Manson's son. That's weird. They know who the moon
Mhm.
children are, and they're trying to gather them in.
What does it mean to be a moon child, I guess, is what I would ask. I know what it means personally because I've done,
Okay.
this, I've done many shows on this, but there's going to be at least half the listeners that have no idea what a moon child is. Because
The
before you go any further,
CIA, okay,
okay.
other people do it, I guess, because I saw a blip on Jack Parsons. You don't know who that is, do your research. Jack Parsons, Jet
Of course,
Propulsion
yeah, Jack
Laboratories.
Parson. Yeah.
You look up his occupation, what it should say is rocket scientist, but it says occultist. Bam. Makes
Hmm.
more sense that NASA is a religion, y'all. Wake up. Right? So a moonchild, and this is sickening, but basically, in my personal account, 7 brothers, and my father was the 7th son of a 7th son, Aragon from Spain. And they're here, and why, I don't know, but they lured a bunch of girls who were born on the Texas military base where they started doing MK Ultra in the 40s when the guys all came home from kicking Hitler's, but we didn't really kill him. And so now my grandpa was hard at work doing the records for Operation Paperclip and all that, right? Pissed off that the government was lying to America, sneaking stuff to newspapers. Meanwhile, something's going on with my mother's conception. And then later, when my mother graduates, she's a blonde, blue-eyed virgin in San Francisco. They moved the whole military base and all those same children from, this whole Werner von Braun business. They move them to San Francisco. My mother was in the daycare of the Presidio, Colonel Michael Aquino. I later was in the same daycare. I was there.
Hmm.
My mother, in my conception, was Halloween night, Halloween night, 1964. And what they did, these Aragon brothers, and again, it's magic. And it's they drugged the Kool-Aid, honest to God, no joke. Nobody, but LSD was not known yet because the CIA had their hand in that, didn't they? And they were using it on the poor girls that were conceived on the base. And now here they are, they're doing another sex ritual, second generation that I know of. And I'm the second generation, my mother's first generation. And they drug the girls, they rape them, and then they come back later and they scoop them up and do blood tests on all the babies. And I guess I was the lottery winner. So, and then, but I got old enough to start talking about it, and I was still in the daycare, and I was talking to my grandma behind a closed door, said, what happened? Because they were poking me. And she said they took the blood out of my neck, and my mother burst through the door and said, Mama, what the F? You taking Mary to that place, that castle you took me to. So then that lets me know there's a whole lot of drama there. And I asked my mother later. But when I started talking about it, they stopped taking me to that castle. But I wanted to tell you, Catherine of Aragon Nina Pinta Santa Maria, Catherine of Aragon. Her father and mother gave the boats to Christopher Columbus, if any of that is true. Catherine of Aragon was wedded to King Henry VIII. I think he was like 11 and she was 14, and they conceived a child not long after that. And then the midwives reported the baby stillborn. So when I was 32, May Musk sent me a book which broke. I had a nervous breakdown right in front of my mother when she mentioned. My mother called me and said, "Mary Light, Mary, I need." I said, "What do you need, Mom?" She said, "I ran into Light, May Musk," and I said, "You don't just run into." This is in 1996. I said, and I'd been hiding in the woods drinking creek water from the end of the world. I said, "Mom, you don't just run into Light. What did she want?" And she gave a book, and it was a reminder of who I am, and they want me back. Okay, I'm nobody, John. I'm just a hippie in the woods with Missy here, but I'm telling you the truth. So why does all this matter? Because when Fritz Springmeier or any of the CIA documents talk about the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, which I know the world is very interested in, and I'm just here to tell you that there's a missing piece. There's the true bloodline to rule the world was the Aragon blood that they stole the baby. And they've been rebreeding the Antichrist, Rosemary's baby. Rosemary is a spell they're trying to. I can't explain it why. But this Rosemary's baby is hiding in plain sight. They're breeding the Antichrist. They're trying to mix the devil with human flesh. Why? I don't know, John. I was conceived in a sex ritual. My mother was drugged and raped. I hate her less and less every day. It wasn't her fault what they did to her. I started my journey asking God, how did my mother have split personalities and be a madam of San Francisco if my grandfather was a good, kind man? And God gently took me down the road and showed me so gently. So in between my little live broadcast of crying over being out of cat food, because I'm the crazy cat lady where I live, and that's okay. God has shown me piece by piece documents. For instance, I found a 1950 census record. My mother is 3 years old, and it's on a military base in Texas that has now changed the name. Well, like, it's a two-piece document, one of those long legal documents. So the bottom address was folded, and I couldn't find the whole address. I didn't know it existed. And then one day it popped up open. And on some, I was in Ancestry or something, but I saw the whole, and I Googled the street address where my mother lived, and I have a picture of her, a couple of them, where she's 3 years old on this military base. And, you know, the barracks. And dear God, John, I Googled the address, and an old newspaper pops up, which I didn't save. I don't know where it is. I had a nervous breakdown about that for a minute. And it's the same address, different barracks number or whatever those are. They're like apartments. And was it Jolly West or Gottlieb or one of these crazy mad scientists in the CIA game? One of them was doing CIA LSD experiments on the military base, and the cover story doesn't add up. But basically, a 3-year-old got raped to death, a 3-year-old girl, and it was at my mother's address. And I realized, and then my grandfather would move. I'm thinking, why is Grandpa moving around the military bases? Maybe he's like, they're doing evil stuff. I gotta go. But then the next job, they're doing evil stuff too. I mean, you jump out of the frying pan into the fire. So, did it happen to my mom? I don't know. But I asked God, what happened to my mom? What made her like that? And I got a couple of facts. One fact is there's a document that says she lived in the same place where they were dosing the population with LSD. He killed an elephant on too much LSD. He was using it. And also there was an experiment going on at the same time of false confessions. What do we got to do to drug somebody to get them to say they did it when they didn't do it? And then let's ask the logical question, who did do it? Somebody did that. And that's all CIA. But in 1977, something called an MK Ultra Church Committee document, you might add to a link. and Joe Biden and Kennedy are on the same document investigating, damn it, who's raping these kids and doing all this LSD. Sorry about the cussing. And then they say, put a stop to that. Right? And I'm like, well, gee, I'm sure that Haldeman shows back up in my life, and that's Elon's grandfather. 78 or later, because the hooker's ball, you know, I went when I was 13, I think, dressed as I Dream a Genie. Does that make any sense? No. Why? I don't know. But I was there. I saw Jerry Brown and Linda Ronstadt go by. Meatloaf was singing on the stage, and there were 3 levels. And that's a city auditorium. There's a legal, somebody rented that building and had a permit to throw this big orgy. Right? I went with a CIA agent who was my lifelong drunk uncle, Tom Richardson, who bought me a $6,000 horse when I turned 5. I didn't realize what that meant, but now I do. And oddly enough, me being dressed as I Dream a Genie, and if anybody's well read here, and I think you are, the horse's name was Scheherazade. And it was a famous racehorse that came from Scheherazade. Did it come from Armenia? It came from Arabia somewhere, right? Comes off the ships. Tom outbid all those Arab sheiks and got me this. Why that's so interesting is because in the Arabian Nights, I have the book around here. In the Arabian Nights, I think it's the 40 Tales of the Arabian Nights. If you know Aladdin and Genie, and this has something to do with NASA. But Scheherazade is a blind maiden in the story, and she tells us there's a sheik who kills a girl every night and needs a new bride every day, and she's the beautiful blind girl they bring to him, but she tells a story. She never finishes the story, and so he lets her live. And that was the name of my horse. And oddly enough, their own symbolism is their demise, right? Because I remember God has allowed me to all of a sudden remember all these stories, and why Charlie Manson has anything to do with all this, I don't know, except for that he's their God. And me, I'm rogue. They think I'm, May Musk treated me very well, like her future mother-in-law. And when Elon slipped with things like that, it scared the crap out of me, John. When I realized this, I was always going to be their genie in the bottle. Even though the cover story was I'm the babysitter from across the street, this is all planned. Years ago, this is part of the plan. Elon is a pharaoh. I asked if he was human. I asked if he was an experiment. Like, I never believed that he was real. He was growing at an odd rate. The story didn't line up. They had laboratories everywhere. I knew they were doing this stuff because clones are real. Human clones are real. Let's see. I think I answered the Charlie Manson story.
Well, I do have one more question for you, and I know we don't want to sit here and talk forever on it, because I know the more you talk about it, the more it kind of, we talked about this, more emotional and things that come up that we don't want to come up. But I do have a question I think that everybody's interested. What made you question if Elon Musk was the Antichrist? What have you seen?
Very well, coming at me like a diamond in a facet, just perfect, John. Because he opened the abyss. And I didn't have the language to articulate what was happening. And my aunt would yell at me, "Why don't you want to go over there anymore?" And I said, "Because he's doing some voodoo shit, Aunt Peggy." That's what I said. I said, "He's just doing voodoo, Aunt Peggy. I don't want to go over there." Because I was well read, but I wasn't into science fiction, and I wasn't into the occult, right? I had a lot of natural abilities, and I didn't need to study anything to do these things. I thought everybody did them. But in my heart, I loved Jesus, And I wanted to be on Team Jesus. So I tried to rationalize being with these, whatever they were, Illuminati, whatever that was, because my aunt always told me they're the Illuminati when I would ask these questions. Okay, the first time that I remember light leaving us alone, and I would never have a straight answer and no commitment as to how long this time would be, because she was going on, there was one time where she went to prison and switched places with one of the Manson girls and stayed in there. I never know when she's coming back. And so Joaquin would bring me what I needed. But he got into his mother's room, and I've worked for a lot of people, and I don't want any children to get into their drugs or whatever they're into. Sometimes people leave things laying around or guns. And I didn't want him in his mother's room. And my aunt had put the fear of God into me about not God, but she just kept saying, they're the Illuminati, don't piss them off. So whatever that means. And so he was in his mom's room and he was being sneaky and he was laughing and he was running by and he had these artifacts in his hand that I would compare to Stonehenge little objects. They were little rock gods. I would call them gods. And I had a healthy fear of demonic forces. I didn't want to play with that on purpose. But something was, he was running back and forth and he got some things out of his mother's African trunk, I called it, because they were from Africa. And he put them in his room and something was happening in there. And, before there's a lightning storm, you can feel the barometric pressures changing and the light changes in the sky, the sky gets a green haze, everything changes. Unless you're a zombie, you're aware. And I was aware something was happening. And I said, come on out of there. And I didn't like to say his name. I call him little buddy or, hey, honey, come on out of there. And something was happening. And my aunt had told me, don't let nothing happen to that little kid. And the way that she said it, and I never, I protect kids from dogs and anything. I mean, I handle horses and monkeys. I'm not afraid of most things. And the way that she said, I said, why? And she said, he's going to rule the world someday. And it was always so serious. He's going to rule the world someday. They're the Illuminati. So when something was happening in there, and I was afraid to look at it, and I could see, and I saw his face, and he was so happy, and I reached in, and I grabbed his arm. And I've had my arm pulled out of socket so many times. I'm very sensitive to ever being rough with anyone. But if you're going to save their life, better save their, if you're grabbing somebody to save their life. And I grabbed him, and I got sucked in, and there were some ancient glorious ones in there. There's no bottom. I now look and think it's the abyss. One of them grabbed me by the throat, and it was very difficult, and I cried out to Jesus. And I dare say, I'm not ready to say it, but Jesus saved me. And now, and we got sucked out of there, and we rolled through the carpet out of his room, and we were in the living room on the floor, laying down, looking at each other. And he said, Moon, why are you not like my friends? So now, 45 years in the future, I'm an adult. I'm reading my Bible. I love Revelation. I was afraid of it. I'm not afraid anymore because it's not the revelation of the boogeyman. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Revelation is about he bought us back. He's breaking, and he won the title deed back to the earth, and he won us back right, and but he gave the keys to the abyss. Jesus Christ won the keys back, but he gives them to Apollo at the end. Why? I don't know, but he does. In Revelation 10, and Apollo opens the abyss and lets his 4 friends out. I think they're the 4 fallen angels from Genesis 6. And the number of their army is 200 million. Well, that's odd. I did hear a report about 5 years ago that Elon Musk had 200 million robots ready to rock and roll out of Silicon Valley when the FDA gives them the approval to move forward. And I'm pretty sure they did move forward. Elon Musk is marching them down main streets and red carpets. And people are cheering. What does the number of their army mean? I've been doing a lot of listening to Dr. Michael Heiser and Chuck Missler. Well, Chuck Missler for 40 years. I've been listening to his stuff forever. And Calvary Chapel, because I've been a Calvary Chapel worship leader off and on for 40 years. But and jail chaplain for Point Man Ministries and other things, amongst falling down and blowing my whole witness 1,000 times too. But so 4 fallen angels, they have permanent bodies. But they're children because they were never meant to have children. They don't have bodies. They're disembodied spirits. They need a body. I'm going to do some deductive reasoning here, and what I think doesn't matter. But A plus B could equal C. You know, the AI, it seems to me that the ghost is in the machine. It seems to me that the beast is coming forward in the tech. And I'm not afraid of the enemy. I want to use the enemy's sword to cut off his own head, like David and Goliath. So I'm an eyewitness. So I'm not just somebody playing some video of what people think with scary music. I'm telling you what I saw, when I saw it, kind of, you know, because I have to go by, like, for instance, I was there the day John Lennon was reported dead. So when was that time frame? I go by when was the newspaper saying what President Ronald Reagan got elected and Ford, who was that other guy, Jimmy Carter was out. I remember those things happening while I was there. So that's in the Hooker's Ball. And I sent you a postcard. Sorry, I know it was very scandalous, but
no, I didn't. At first, when I saw it, I saw it and I was like, wow, what is this? So I'm glad you explained it.
That I was dressed as I Dream a Genie and went to the Hooker's Ball with the CIA, my drunk Uncle Tom, and he's wearing the Men in Black suit with the cigar. And I was supposed to be auctioned off to the highest bidder in a mock auction because I pulled the smoke alarm. I was famous for ruining the Hooker's Ball, but thank God I did. Because I did get the last minute. I don't get the last minute jitters about going on stage for nothing, but I wasn't down with getting chopped up and sent to the 4 corners of the earth because you never know what's going to happen after the Hooker's Ball.
Yeah.
So you could be queen of the world or you could be a victim, and I choose not to be a victim. I pulled the smoke alarm, and the rain came down, and we all had to run out of anyway, but I did go to Penny Lane, Napa, California, about an hour out of San Francisco, to a nice little cottage with my auntie, my real auntie, who was born first on the base with my mother in Texas. So one of my 3, I think at least 3 of my aunties were born on that same base or in Texas, and one of them is born a boy. And then by 3 years later in the census, they're a girl. And it has a boy's name. So I'm like, that's where they were doing that, you know? And it's just all shocking. It's just all shocking, John, to see it in your own
It is
records.
shocking. So do you believe that, like, because I've seen a lot of people that are supposedly exposing these people for being inverts, I guess, like a lot of famous
What's an
people. Is that
invert?
what, like an invert is somebody that was born another sex and then they've been inverted at some point early in life to where nobody knows except for them, maybe not even them, and maybe their parents only.
Well, all I can say is that it's been going on a long time, whether you're an experiment, obviously a baby didn't choose to do that. And they had to learn what hormones or whatever these mad scientists are doing. I don't know. I don't know. I can tell you that one of my relatives in Oregon is the very first youth on record legally that did that, and they're miserable and they're always in and out of jail and suicidal, and they need Jesus. And they need Jesus because they're not happy being flipping teams. It didn't work. And now they can't go back. But Jesus Christ can save all of us. If they're a eunuch, and that's a whole other subject. We probably don't want to get you taken off of YouTube. But in the end, they're not happy. And
Yeah.
there's and so anyway, what was I talking about? The military base. Yeah, it's all in the records. And so I found an MK Ultra compensation victims line in Canada, a phone number. I called it. It's out of service, but I was like, wow, we need one in America because it's still happening, even though they ordered us to stop that stuff in 1977 on that document called the Church Committee with Biden and Kennedy on it. We still kept it up because here I show up for business. And they do dress like men in black. They do. And they're not aliens because you can't prosecute an alien. So sometimes they just fake their death and keep up the bad missions that they were doing, because I've seen it. I've seen it over and over again now that I'm paying attention. Now, I did write President Trump about this, but it was a very shaky hand in, I think, 2018. And I warned him about that Musk family. I said some things that didn't make any sense. What I thought didn't matter. What matters is what I saw, what I remember. And I told him Elon Musk's grandfather was arrested for being a technocrat leader. Don't trust them Musks. Probably writing a technocrat about another technocrat. I don't know. I'm not going to argue with anybody about it. You know, God bless everybody. God bless America. And I pray like a little child. I pray, God save everybody, you know. But no sympathy for the devil, John. I'm not out for that anymore, right? Because I'm awake and I have been trying to save everybody my whole life. But now I just want to get home safely and take as many as I can, as long as they've decided to love the truth, right? Because the Bible warns of mockers and scoffers in the last days. And I read the chat. It makes me cry, John. They're trash talk. Everybody's all, it's a show, man. It's such a circus in there. But a dear friend of mine, hi, Keith. He played a doctor on Grey's Anatomy, but Keith, I think his website is gexit.com. Keith was a city administrator and a planner in Cleveland, Ohio. He's a numbers man. He's got a lot of degrees in numbers. He told me that 70% of the chat are AI bots. So us Christians are wasting our time arguing with them, right? We're not going to convert them. And if I would have told you this story 10 years ago, I would have been telling you about working for Charlie Manson, because nobody knew who Elon Musk was. So it would have been a different story. You know what I mean? Nobody cared about that little boy.
Yep. Very true. Well, I appreciate you coming and telling this story, and I'm excited to meet you in person. I know that it's going to be an awesome time, and I'm really thankful for you doing this. So if you would let people know where they can watch you at here on YouTube, or if you want to give
I'm
them
always getting taken down. I was told I cannot come back to YouTube, but I still got some channels. So, okay, thank you. My name is Rosemary. I'm Shalom girl. That means peace. That's the word Jesus said, shalom to the storm, peace. I do have a P.O. Box 135 in Lowell, Oregon, 97452. I have some Gmails. I know it's all the devil, but Shalom Girl Mary at gmail.com, Shalom Girl 3 at gmail.com. If I do, I volunteer at the After School Bible Club, so I'm always baking snacks and Play-Doh. I am, ruthlessly. Send me juice boxes and graham crackers, because I believe the Bible verse, Romans 8, what is it, 28, where what the devil meant for God, bad, evil, God is using for good. And so I do art to support my whatever it is, mission to flight Nazis for Jesus. And I don't know what I'm doing. I never planned for any of this to happen. I didn't want to tell you this story. But cowards don't go to heaven. And so Jesus says, if you lift up my name, I will draw all men unto myself. So we flipped it. And this was Elon's name when I met him. But that's not his real name. This is God's name. And nobody but a blasphemer would do that. And that really messed with my head, reading my Bible. But let's see. But if you'd like some art or, oh, I think my phone is dying. If you'd like some art or a postcard or to buy some canvas stuff, or you'd like to mail me a bag of cat food because I rescue feral cats and get them fixed and stuff. And, cry about the end of the world. So thank you, everybody. God bless you. Oh, and I'll be selling some worship CDs. And it's the first time I'll ever be selling worship CDs. And they're not in a studio. Most of them are played at homeless shelters or at churches on Calvary Chapel stages. They're just recorded with all the static. But if you want to support my work, whatever it is, I'd be really thankful. And I'd be happy to mail you. So I don't have a website, but I'd be happy to mail you a painting because there's so much more to the story. But like the book of Revelation, I don't want it to be scary. I want it to be about Jesus. So I got to be careful to come out into the sunlight and take a breath of fresh air and remember it's about Jesus and not the boogeyman. So thank you for listening, everybody. God bless you. Mwah.